What is up, everybody? Welcome back here to the Devy YouTube channel. You know what time it is. Every week, I go over the risers and fallers in Devy and in college football, and we talk about, is it a trend, or should we start, not worried about it too much, or is this something that we got to look at for Devy value you might want to shift off of, right? And if you're a college football fan, we go through some of the best performances from last week and overall on their season. So hit that like and subscribe button while the intro is going, and I'll catch you guys on the other side. All right, let's talk about these players. I had to put Quinshon Judkins up there, but it's not a positive one, and it is going to be a negative as part of the fallers. We're going to have that conversation right now. When we talk about the risers, let's get into some guys that, we really feel like are doing well in terms of value and Devy value and just what they've been able to put on the field. First one's Blake Corum, and Blake is the one that I struggle with because I'm a Michigan fan, so I've watched Blake his entire career, and I struggle with his value. Like, I do a big board every week for football guys, and I dive in like, what is his value right now? And he's a riser for me right now. And Donovan Edwards is a big faller. We talked about Edwards last week, and I mentioned all the reasons why we should be a little concerned. And again, he kind of threw it up another dud, right? He had a couple receptions, but Blake Corum has just been consistent. He's had 8 touchdowns already this season, as you can see. He, going in the last 3 weeks, he had 3, 2, and 2. He scored, I think, a touchdown in the last 15 games that he started. He's been absolutely phenomenal, right? So you have to give him a shout out in terms of risers. 172 yards after contact is okay. Missed tackles for us is 8, which is okay. Explosive runs is never going to be his thing, and I still worry about his overall value in the NFL. I know Christian Williams is going back and forth on this, here at the channel of what that is, but his elusive rating is not good. 37.4 is not what you want to see it as. You really want to see it that 100 to 120. But his lateral agility in the inside of tackles and his ability to kind of make guys miss is special, right? So I think it's something to talk about. Like, he's having a heck of a year again, right? So when we think of that 351 yards, I do think he's raised his value as far as Devy because I think people are really off of him. What does that mean? I am not sure. I think that I think he could be a solid guy. But when you think of it, like, you really need that explosiveness, right? Like, is he Chase Brown? I think that is the question mark that we all have to ask ourselves. But I have to give him a shout out because I do think his Devy value has risen. Might be a point where you can maybe ship him and move him for an NFL asset. That could be something that you look at moving forward. Now, let's talk about the next guy, Troy Franklin. I am a Troy Franklin stan. Everybody knows that. And he's been just balling. And you know what? He looks like a first-round wide receiver. And I hate to break it to all the haters out there. He is really good. And his fact that he got up to 187 pounds listed is a very, very solid sign. Here's what he's done this season: 25 catches, 418 yards, and 5 touchdowns. He had 300-yard games this year. He probably would have had more against Hawaii, but they didn't really need him. Even against Colorado, the 8 catches, 126 yards, and 2 touchdowns all came in that first half. So we haven't seen the full display of him. He's looked phenomenal. Receiving grade is almost 80. He's only had 3 drops on the year. His out wide percentage is 85.8. So we know what he's going to be moving forward in the NFL. His 8 out is 12.3, which is okay. But overall, he's playing right now like he's a round 1 wide receiver. And if you have Troy, he was going in the 3rd or 4th round of some Devy drafts, which was blasphemous. And I, if you follow this channel and you drafted Troy at that because I told you that was way, way too low, you're welcome. That's why we're here, and that's why I'm here to kind of help you identify these guys. Troy Franklin can be a first-round draft pick. I was huge on Zay Flowers. I was big on Marvin Mims. Some of these guys that kind of have popped off. Troy reminded me of those guys, those late-round guys that can play at a first-round level talent. I'm happy for Troy. I think he's playing really good right now. Oregon has a chance to really make a splash as they get into the tougher part of their Pac-12 schedule. Troy could be a big part of that. Next guy, Brian Thomas Jr. He's a guy that I highlighted when I did the LSU wide receiver room. So go check that video out. He's playing freaking good right now. Brian, 6'4", 205. You have to give him credit where credit's due. 25 catches, 413 yards, and 5 touchdowns. And he looks really solid. Like, Jaden Daniels and him had those 2 touchdowns against Arkansas. He looks really good. Eye discipline. He had 5 catches, 133 yards, and 2 touchdowns there against Arkansas this last week. Very, very solid prospect. I think he's someone to note. He should be on a watch list out there. He's always kind of had talent. He just never really came through, right? The LSU wide receiver room. him. And him and Neighbors make up a heck of a 1-2 punch in the SEC. You see it there, only 2 drops on the year, wide percentages where he's at, has a higher ADOT than Troy Franklin. So that's something to note too. So keep an eye on Brian Thomas Jr. Just as a prospect. I do think that he'll get a little bit more buzz out there as the season goes. If he can continue to really kind of step up for the Tigers. He's a size and frame, right? 6'4", 205. He has good speed. I like Brian Thomas Jr. I did a deeper breakdown before when we kind of dived into the LSU wide receiver room, but he is someone to know. Keep an eye on him. And I even mentioned it, like he could be that guy for this offense. Now, let's talk about fallers. Let's go into the fallers first, and then we'll dive into it. Quinshon Judkins, kind of the spoiler alert kind of went away there. I don't know how much this is. We talked about it in our Discord. Is it the offensive line? Is it the offense? What's happening here with Quinshon? Maybe Zach Evans not being able to be there like he was last year, kind of take some volume away, give him a little bit of a breather. I don't know what it is with Judkins, but he's not looked good this year, right? So 4 games, 57 attempts, 201 yards, and 4 touchdowns, only 3.5 per yards per carry average, 8 catches, 80 yards. He's never going to be a big receiver anyway, but just hasn't looked good. 148 yards after contact is not something that we used to seeing. And then again, that's kind of like that offensive line stuff. Look at that offensive line. He only has 201 yards. I mean, he literally is having to get out of the way all the time. Maybe that is the offensive line. 10 missed tackles forced, he does do that well, right? So when we're thinking of like, maybe that's the O-line support, maybe that's the problem, is that he always have to miss these guys. So I don't want to say that he's a faller, but I think people have got to be concerned. Some people draft him in the first round or second round of Devy drafts, early second, late first-ish, right? Some people draft him in the top 7 or 8 last offseason. He's not returning that value right now. That's where a faller is. Not that he's going to fall off the map, but that's something to know, right? Explosive runs only 4. He hasn't seen those big type plays. Elusive rating has not been good, but I think the question is, and all 22 tape is going to tell us the story, is this Judkins or is this that offensive line? But right now, as of like when we're looking at, is this a faller or riser? He's a faller. I think that you got to be concerned. And this is that note. Raheem Sanders, who we've mentioned already, Judkins, a lot of these running backs have not returned value for the pick that you placed on them. So, do we just not draft running backs anymore in Devy? Is that what we should do? Unless it's a Bijan level type prospect. Even Nicholas Singleton has kind of struggled a little bit in terms of that value returning. So Judkins is right there with them. Now, the next guy, and this is more of a just, we missed early, right? So JoJo Earl, 5'10", 176 wide receiver, went to TCU, was at Alabama, went to TCU, and people thought, hey, maybe he could kind of get that, prospect level that he was at. 58.83 receiving grade, not great. 2 drops, slot percentage is 86, and ADOT's 4.6, which is terrible. Not to mention, he only has 4 catches, 51 yards, right? That is bad. He does have a touchdown on the year, but he has not looked good at all this season. And I think that's something to note when you think of JoJo is like, hey, it's over, right? When we think of JoJo Earl and we're talking about him as a prospect, we're done, like in terms of his value. I mean, he was getting drafted extremely, extremely high last year. And that's something to note, and 2 years ago, especially when he came out, he was a hell of a prospect. I'll be the first one to admit, taking on his tape, his ability to make guys miss, he was a hell of a prospect out there in Texas and Fort Worth. But he just didn't have it. And he just has not performed that he needed to do. At TCU, we haven't seen those numbers up. So this looks like a complete loss as far as Devy value. This is why also, when we're thinking of guys, sometimes we miss some wide receivers as well, right? That's why how tough this format is if you're playing college fantasy. But JoJo Earl just looks like a complete miss. Does not look good at TCU. Did not look good at Alabama. He did get banged up, but this is a big one. This is an oops by us as a Devy, area and Devy analyst. So appreciate you guys tuning in. Again, these are our risers and fallers of the week 4 college football season. Still a long week away, but be on the lookout tomorrow. I'm going to be dropping a 2024 mock draft of all these guys, kind of talking about what player values are right now and give you an idea of some pick values. So if you're a Dynasty fan, stick to that one. Hit that like and subscribe button. I will check you guys on the next video.